Hey guys, welcome to my another C programming tutorial, and in this tutorial I'll teach you something on arrays again, and we'll see how to pass the arrays into a function. Pass arrays into functions, all you have to do is you'll have to just specify, we had a function where inside those parentheses will have what kind of input does it take. Okay, so inside that we'll have to write only the name of the array, and I'll just repeat it again. Write only the name of the array, don't specify those braces, square braces. Okay, so for example, I'll just tell you if I have an array of int and I'll call it r1. Okay, and it's of 24 elements. Okay, so now if I have to pass this into say a function, I'll call it modify array, and I know a had to be capital, but it's okay. So so how would that do is we'll have to just write the name arr1. Okay, don't specify the curly braces, put a comma and then specify the curly braces. Unlike in the case of characters, it had a special null character. In integers and all we don't have. So what this will do is this will automatically fix a size of 24 elements for this array. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to tell you. In the main function I've called this function. Okay, so what this I want this function to do is I want it to modify the original array, and we can actually modify the original array inside the memory blocks as well. So what this does is the name itself. Okay, when you pass the name itself, the name itself will point to the first element of the array, that is the 0th element. Okay, so the name itself, it will point to the 0th element of the array, and therefore with the help of that you can modify the entire array. I'll just show you that with an example. Okay, so I'll just take char and I'll just name array. I'll keep the array of 5. Okay, and now I'll just print out array is equal to percentile p. Now what percentile p does is it is basically a hexadecimal value, and percentile deconversion specifier normally outputs addresses as hexadecimal number, so it'll just output the address. Okay, so remember, percentile p is used to output the address. Now let me just see the address of the first element, that is the 0th element. So all we have to do is we have to mention the prefix index 0. Okay, so I'll put percentile p again, and in the new line we'll just see the address of the array. Okay, when you see the address of the array, even that would point at the same thing, that is the first element of the array or the 0th element of the array. Okay, so now I'll just write the array comma the address of the array's 0th element. Okay, and the address of the array. Okay, so I just missed the percentile over here. So now let's just build and run it. You see, it'll all have the same value. These are all the same values. And to know more about the hexadecimal value, you can just Google it. So this is what I was trying to tell you. I just passed the name of the array. It just pointed at the first element of the array, and for now I just printed out even the first, where the location of the first element of the array, the 0th element, even that has the same address, and also the address of the array. All of these will point to the first element of the array. Okay, so now let's see something else. Let's see how to modify an array. Now in this program I'll just tell you how arrays are passed by reference, and keep one thing in mind: when you pass an array to a function, C always does it, it'll pass it by reference. Okay, now you can also pass individual elements of an array, and it would be done just as you pass any simple variable to it. Okay, so I'll just show you the difference between both of it, and I'll show you how do you call the array function. When you call a function from a main function, when you call a function, how do you pass the values of an array and the size, in case you didn't understand in the previous example. So what I've done here is I've just taken an constant. I've named the size as 5, okay, so that I don't have to change it every time. I'll just change it once over here and it's done. Okay, so I'll just define size as 5, and then I'll prototype two function, and what this would do is I want it to return nothing. Okay, and I've given it a name modify array, and I want it to accept an array and to note down its size. Okay, so again in this one it returns nothing, and the name of this would be modify element and the single element. You can, as I said, to pass the array element, it is as you did it in the previous tutorials and all. It's just like passing a simple variable to it. So I've just taken int e, and but remember, when you're passing an array, you'll have to tell, hey, it is expecting to receive an integer, but when you encounter this function, it has to receive an integer and its size will be specified over here. Okay, so now jumping into the main program, what I've done here is I've just taken two variables. I've just named it int I is for my for loop, and this is, and I've defined an array, and I've initialized it to 1 2 3 4 5 as I had 5 elements over there. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll just print out the original array using my for loop. What this would do is it'll give 4-character space to make it look a little neat. So it'll loop through each time and print out 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, then I'll come over here, I'll call the modify array function, and note here I have not mentioned any square brackets. All I've mentioned is the name of the array, which is a, and the size of the array, okay, which was 5. Okay, as I had said in the previous example how to modify it, when you call it, you don't have to specify square braces, you just have to type the name and the size. Now what this would do is it'll start searching where is modify array function, so it'll jump right over here. It'll come over here and it'll accept the array input. As we have passed 1 2 3 4 5 over here, it'll accept that, and the size of this would be 5. So now what I've done here is I've just modified the array. I've just added 2 to each element. Okay, so as I said, it will modify inside the memory block. Okay, the 2 will be added to each element inside the memory block. So it won't return anything. Note that I didn't tell it to return anything, integer or nothing. So when I come back to this, it'll print out the new value, the modified value. Okay, this will be the array by reference. Okay, first I'll show you that. I'll just build and run it, and you can see the original array, as we know, it was 1 2 3 4 5. It is 1 2 3 4 5, and what it did here was it just called the modify array function. So it went over here and then it just added 2 to each. So 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 2 4, 2 plus 2 5, and it just added all. Okay, so this, it just got modified over here. As I said, when you pass it by reference, it takes the memory location. As I showed in the previous example, we used %p, so it'll point to the memory location and it will change the entire array. Okay, so now let's see what will happen if we pass it by value, if we pass individual elements. Okay, so what I've taken here is I've just printed out the value of a of 3, the original value, which is I guess 6 over here right now. So then I call the modify element function. So what this would do is this would jump to modify element, and what I've done here is it'll take the modify element, it was 6 I guess, so it'll take the value of 6 over here and I'll add 2 to it, so it should come out 8 over here. Okay, so now the changed value, I mean the value inside this function is 8, but when we print it out over here it wouldn't change. Okay, because first I'll just show you that. So it was 6, but inside the function it was 8, but when you printed out this thing inside the main again, it was still 6. Okay, here it is. When you print it out again in the main after the call, when you printed out the new value, it was still the same. Okay, now note that when a of 3 is reprinted in the main, it has not been modified because individual array elements are passed by value. Okay, so that's it for this one, this example. And now let's see something called multi-dimensional array. Okay, I'll just clean this thing up. Guys, before I jump into multi-dimensional arrays, I want to tell you, I want to repeat it one more time, but that when you pass the array by reference, it changes the values. It could modify the value in the main memory block of it, so that when we call it again in the main function, as you saw in the previous program, the value changed. But when you call it by value, it doesn't change. It doesn't change in the memory location, as you saw when we printed out in the main function. It just didn't change the value of the array element. Okay, so now let's jump into multi-dimensional array. So now what multi-dimensional array is, it's like, we'll have coordinates. It is also called multi-subscripted arrays. Now multi-dimensional arrays are useful when you are, if you have programmed in MySQL or Oracle, you see the tables, the data table. It'll be very useful there. Okay, so let me just show you how it is. If I write int b and I'll say 2 and then 2 over here. So this was 2 and 2, I'll put equal, and now I'll put 1 comma 2. I've just taken two values. Now I'll separate it by a comma. I'll put another set of values. I'll say I put 3 comma 4. Okay, so now what this is, this would represent the number of rows, this represents number of columns. Okay, so now how this would enter the data is, it would enter the data like, this is the first row. Fill the first row with this 1 2, and fill the second row with 3 4. And what this, as I said, it represents columns. It just represents number of columns. This is first column, second column, first column, second column. So it would represent somewhat like a table having 1 2 3 4 values. Okay, let me just show you in Paint how the memory locations are. So as you can see, I've just entered how this is. So this is a row, and vertical lines, these are columns. Okay, so now this is the 0th row, first row, and second row. How you would enter the values over here, if you put the value a of 0 and 0, what this would do is, this would be 0, this will represent 0th row and the 0th column. This will be 0th row and the first column. Okay, and this would be 0th row, second column. Similarly, this will be the first row, 0th column, first row, first column, first row, second column. So second row, 0th column, second row, first column, second row, second column. Okay, now this is how you'll put the data there. So now let's take an example, and using functions, we'll use functions also to print out the multi-dimensional array. So I'll just write the code. So guys, I've just written down the code for multi-dimensional array, and one thing you would notice here is I've just left I've left one empty and I've filled one. Okay, note that the function definition specifies array parameter, as we have specified here. We have just left this one empty and this one too. I'll just tell you why. When we receive in a single dimensional array, when we receive a parameter, we just leave this one empty. Okay, but we leave it empty in the function's parameter list. The first subscript in the multi-dimensional array, it can be empty. Okay, it's not required, but all the subsequent subscripts must be there. Okay, the compiler uses these subscripts to determine the location in the memory of the elements in a multi-subscripted array. So because of which it can subsequently store the data inside the memory. Okay, so that was about this one. So next, coming to the main, what I've done is I've taken, now as I said, this represents row. I'll have 2 rows and 2 columns. I'll just put in the data, and I'll just printed out a line saying value of b is, and then I've called this function print array b, and make a note, there are no square brackets over here. I've just specified the name. I'll come over here, and as the function prototype, it is over here. I've just taken I and j. This will be for rows and this would be for column. What I wanted to do is finish up the rows first, then come to the next line, then take another row and finish up the row again. So in the row 0, it'll fill 1 2, it'll come to the new line, and it'll print 3 4 in the next row. I'll just show you. If I build and run it, you can see it shows 1 2 3 4. Let's see if I just remove these brackets. Okay, there's an extra bracket. So now let's see what this does. It'll do the same thing as we just saw. It'll just print out 1, 2, 3, and 4. And suppose I just fill in few values. Okay, I just print in only 2 values, but I need just 2 rows and 2 columns. What this will do is it'll automatically fill it with zeros. Okay, as you can see, it automatically filled it with zeros. Okay, so that's it, guys. I hope this was useful. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. I'll come up with pointers. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any doubt, please leave a comment below.